Thank you for downloading, listening to, and watching the Lean Into Artcast, a show where a couple of visual storytellers get together, take on various topics that tend to bubble up once we embark on this endeavor of communicating with images. We think hard about this stuff, so you will too. My name is Jerzy Drozd, cartoonist and teaching artist, and the other host is...
Hey, Jerzy, I am Rob Stenzinger, a user experience designer, and I do stuff like make video games too.
Just a little thing called making video games.
Yeah.
Rob, I don't know if you noticed that there's daylight in my studio.
It looks so bright. That's awesome.
Look at this.
Look at this
lighting.
New studio lights?
we're actually doing the Lean Into Artcast while the sun is still high in the sky, or while the earth is our part of the earth is facing the sun. There's the more precise way of saying it. Not that it matters to anybody listening to the show after the fact or just listening to the audio, but if you're watching the video, you probably noticed that my studio actually has natural light in it for the first time, probably in years since doing this show.
It's been a long time. Like, we did dabble with some daytime recording, some weekends. We did Tuesday for a good while. And at some point, a pretty long time ago, like maybe even like 6+ years, we switched to Thursdays. And then, over time, I come to realize that so many networking things are on Thursday nights. It's pretty funny. So it's like, nope, can't do it. Podcasting. Hey, let's do a happy hour for the group, the team, the project. Yay. Thursday. Thursday works for everybody, right? Nope, not for me. Never, ever. Anyway, so it's fun to try a different time again.
Yeah. Well, it'd be fun to explore some different times to see, who can actually interact with the show while we stream it live. And
I know, and I do feel a little bit bad where it's like we do have our Thursday crew that shows up, right? And it's like, it's messing with other schedules, but change.
Well, also this week in the United States, it's a holiday week, and that's another reason is that tomorrow is a pretty big holiday in the United States, the 4th of July, Independence Day. And so typically one goes out with one's family on that holiday. So and it's a nighttime holiday because there's fireworks. So there's no way we were going to tell our families, hey, guess what? we got a podcast about visual storytelling while you celebrate our nation's 200 and some odd birthday.
Right. Yeah, sometimes a conflict is a pretty hard conflict, which anyway, I mean, we do play with our schedule and we have options or whatever, but this is fun. Here we are during the day, and you can really see in your studio. My studio is more protected, so it's kind of like timeless, a timeless chamber of medium light. Not too dark, not too light. So it's not.
This is Rob's art prepper studio.
Sure.
deep underground. I got enough guitars to survive the end times.
We got guitars. I've got buckets of pencils.
Yeah,
all gratin potatoes. I don't know.
those buckets of food that are supposed to last 2 years.
There you go.
Okay. Usually on this show, we pick a topic and then try to drill all the way down as far as we can with it. In one half of the show, we talk about what it looks like. In the other half of the show, we talk about how we think about it. What are we doing this week, Rob?
Well, this is one where, as we talk about what should we talk about, sometimes small topics come up, and I thought that maybe there's sort of a prepper bucket, if you will, of small topics that is general problem solving, things that come up when we're working on projects, or you get asked to do something and it's related to your sort of creative work. Maybe it's making whatever, it's storytelling, it's visual, but it's kind of related, but it's small. It's not like a big topic, right? So it's sort of its own thing of a few of these, and then we can talk about maybe a bit of sort of what it's like, thinking of this as almost like a, when they're all like DIY mini projects in a way, right?
Create solving odds and ends was the title of this episode. So yes, like little tiny experiences where we overcome some kind of little creative hurdle. So there's a theme to it, but it's a lot of little stories adding up to it. Okay, so then shall I hit the music to get us over to the first part of the show?
Yeah, let's go there.
All right, well, there we go. Not quite the Dragon Ball theme.
That's good though. That's like I want to start marching around a mat, and be like, all right, what's going on?
So, Ann and I were talking about this is totally an aside, but it's kind of related to this. Is trying to start up a mini comics day in Columbus now that we live here. And you remember mini comics day, right?
Mhm.
Where it's a very truncated version of 24-hour comic day where it's just 8 hours do an 8-page mini comic, which is actually a little bit more challenging than it might sound. And I was talking about how like we would need to have like a playlist running of just anthem music like that, like just for 8 hours straight of just getting shouted at by men with big voices telling us that we could do it. That's part of the experience, right?
That sounds fun. I would totally make mini comics in that room, wherever that is.
All right, you're invited.
All right.
Okay, so we're in the topic zone now. So where do you want to start? What's something that happened to you where you had to like overcome a creative challenge?
Well, okay. This is I've got this all over the place. It's basically it's hanging art, and there's a bunch of dimensions to it. And one of them was related to well, Kate had some wall space at her day job that she wanted to put something up, and we've got a giant collection. I mean, on having kids, and they make stuff at home, they make stuff at school. They are, I mean, honestly, it's a good example of how you should just make lots of stuff, because sometimes there's great gems that come out of practicing and making lots of stuff, right? And there's a couple of these gems that we have. It's funny. So we have so much artwork comes into our house. We've got a couple of various places to hang it up. And what's funny, we're not a fridge art house, right? A lot of places solve this where they're like magnets and fridge. You just coat the fridge, whatever. And we've tried that a little bit, but just the stuff gets in the way, stuff falls, whatever. Anyway, so we clip things to wires, and we've got kind of like 2 little wire galleries. And there's a couple of really strong pieces that both Kate and I like a lot, that like one was made, each of our daughters made one of these things. And Kate's like, I want that on the wall, but I want it bigger. And I'm like, well, it makes sense, because I don't know, you hang like one little 8.5 by 11 thing on a wall, and it kind of, I don't know, maybe that works for some folks. I like bigger art. I don't know. So puzzling this out, it's like, well, need to capture a really clean image of it, and then get it larger, and maybe we'll do like print it somehow, maybe poster, maybe whatever. Looked at a few options and landed on wanting to try this like canvas printing. And then looking around, I know I'd like casually saw what I thought was a fair price for a canvas print. And then I'm like looking at the available options, and there's a lot of them that don't seem like they're a fair price for me, but then some that seem fair, but I don't know what size I need. So I needed to start here. Then here we go. Here's my problem I needed to solve. It's like this matchmaking of like what's available at what price, and then at what size, and then what size will be compatible with the ratio of the aspect ratio of the artwork. So I don't know if that's all super basic stuff that people who hang stuff up deal with all the time, but
probably like preparators and art handlers, sure, and like framers, I'm sure can do a lot of that kind of calculating in their mind. But this is something that you are not encountering in your day-to-day life.
Okay, so I feel behind, and I'm like, like people who hang up more artwork are just they're on this, and so for me, I just start I analyze the problem. It's just, I'm like, how do I break this into, it's like this thing, I want to have as much of this artwork as possible on the larger size. How can I do that? And so I did a couple of things. Maybe I'll share my screen to fly through the
Sure.
rest of this. All right. Boop, boop, beep. Clicking on stuff. And
you're gonna talk about Calca, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna. So I think I'll do this screen, and then we got the whole.
I've got the app pulled up on the main screen right now. It's calca.io, which is your
Okay.
symbolic calculator, the text editor that loves math and gives you answers as you type. What?
Yeah. Calc is funny. So so if you were saying that you'll say price, I'm making something up, but you can essentially assign variables a bit like coding syntax. So, some name equals, some number. And then let's see, if I wanted to say total equals price times, 10, I don't know, or let's say a weird number. We had a huge quantity to order, and then Calca lets you essentially do a large arrow with the equals and point, and then you can essentially play with things. So I can change the variables, uh, and just it's a calculator, but with variables, and a little bit like formula that you would put into a spreadsheet, but you're not in the grid of a spreadsheet. And I don't mind that. I like spreadsheets, but it's neat to work sort of long form in notes and just sort of get thoughts out of my head this way. So
Mm.
I happen to need to do a couple of things. So I'll come back to Kelka in a second, but I needed to figure out like what was available, right? So I did an inventory of at the time what was in the market, right? So there's quirky things like FedEx had a bundle, and I'm like, oh boy, how do I don't this is just going to add more, more formulas to Calca, whatever. But like I ended up I didn't end up needing to calculate the price break for a bundle for that. But I looked at FedEx and Shutterfly and Snapfish and Costco, and I think the Costco thing, you don't have to be a member for this. It's like this quirky side service thing that they offer. So and if this is all limited to U.S. options, sorry, our awesome listeners overseas. But this is where I live. But you can reuse this approach to come up with your own thing. I also made an Illustrator set of artboards for all the different sizes of the different vendors: Snapfish, Shutterfly, FedEx, and Costco. And I looked for like, well, and there's overlap too. So it could have happened where, like, look at this like just like from a distance, you see this inventory. There's some overlap, but there's lots of not overlap. Like they're each trying to compete in a space that no one else is in too. And I thought, oh, I might end up on one of those sizes and not have any choices as far as price. We'll see. Anyway, so I did more. So I brought all these sizes, and so it's like you can get an 8x8, an 8x10, 10x40, all the way up to like 40x60, right? And I thought, like, well, what are these? So what are these ratios that I'm looking for? And then this lets me eyeball if I do a calculation of, let's say, the pixel size of one of my kids' paintings, right? So I got this high res art. It just happens to be these pixels. I didn't do much other than to capture it and then get it a little bit cropped and whatnot. So it was clean and just that artwork. And then it ended up at this ratio of 0.74. So then I started looking around. I'm like, well, what art can I do here that's about 0.74, right? Or 0.75. And I ended up picking, I think, 18x24 for that one. And then it's like, well, who's got 18x24? Anyway, so yeah, FedEx had it for $94. Or wait, no. So I ended up switching it up because I think I cropped it a little bit, because look at the price difference. So FedEx was 94, and if I found a way to get that thing to be 16x24, crop a little bit out, it's like half the price. So anyway, so I use this combination of the natural size of the art, the prices available, the ratios available, whatever, and it was totally playing with these variables available. But this was the handy thing. This inventory let me explore what you know, what options might be compatible with the different artwork. And I think it ended up being, so let's see. So that was, so yeah, my other kid's art was 0.66 ratio. And so that ended up being different. And that was more spot on with 16 by 24. But then one was portrait, one was landscape. And it didn't do a lot of damage to the one to do a little cropping. So again, that was being opportunistic, saying like, well, if I'm a purist here, I'm paying twice the price. Anyway, so that was me problem solving for this, where I thought it was pretty fair. And it turned out well. I don't have a picture of them right now, but like, anyway, so what does this remind you of anything, Jerzy, or do you want to switch to a different problem?
Well, no, it's just that I did not realize that canvas printing was that complex. And I wouldn't have.
Is it, or did I make it complex?
You made it into a fully researched topic instead of just like going like, well, I guess I'm paying $70 for this thing, right? Like actually, like, I didn't realize that they were all competing in like their own size. I haven't done that kind of comparison shopping before. Like I've had exactly one thing printed on canvas before for an art show, and I just went to like a local guy just like to support a local business kind of thing. I haven't actually done like the work of looking at what everybody's doing on this. So you're not alone in being quote unquote behind on this. That was news to me that they would all have different. I would assume that there'd be like, you got poster size, you got tabloid size, you got letter size, maybe A4, B6 and whatever, but that would be it. I didn't realize it was that unstandardized. So
it's very much not standard. Then, and some of them will offer squares, some of them don't, or some of them don't offer large squares. They just offer small squares. I don't know. It really depends on like, if you look at your art ratio and see where it's most compatible. And if you're willing to, fudge it a little bit, then you can find a wider range of compatibility. But I didn't have that variable. I didn't have another list of like, and this other art, local business I want to support. That wasn't on my
well, no, I happen to be married to somebody who works in the museum field. So like I had that signal was very active. So when I said like, hey, I need to print this thing, I just got to mention it to her and she was like, oh, I know a guy because I worked with him on different art installations in the past kind of thing.
Cool.
So that was something where I didn't even have to do any research, Rob. So don't give me any special props for that. But what was interesting is in his case, he just gave you like, what's the maximum width? And then like, he would give you some options on pricing like per inch based on like he would just cut it the size. So like, okay, if the maximum width is like 18 inches, I can do, here's what, 18 by 10 will cost you, 18 by 12, 18 by 14. Like he would just charge by the inch at 10 wide, which made, so I didn't have to think about that ratio thing. It was just like, okay, I want it to fit in this frame. Therefore, this is gonna be the maximum width and it'll be approximately this long. Give me a price. But I can see how, with a company like say FedEx or some companies that are gonna do like a lot of sort of like made to order, like very customer friendly sort of dimensioning, they're going to want it to be very templated, right? Just make sure it fits into this template size. There's less that can go wrong when you do it that way.
Oh, for sure. I mean, they're probably looking, I would imagine it's been a few months since I did this work, right? That each of these sizes is like their own product, right? And if they're not selling, I imagine that list changes. I would guess, because that's kind of that's a different specialty, right? Where, someone who can just make it any size, that's pretty awesome. But I don't know. And honestly, I'm curious, like what that person's prices are.
I'd have to go back and look through my email, but as a matter of fact, I think I might have not even had an email about it. It might have been entirely through the phone, but but let me check through my email and I can give you a sense of what I paid for that. It was like 4 years ago, so I have no memory of it. But well, yeah, I'll get back to you. So
yeah, cool. Anyway, that was an interesting one where I don't think it's a whole episode, but yeah, what are some other things that you've been thinking of? And
I just like
problems?
so mine is going to be a little less systematic, but I do like that sort of a theme of this entire podcast series is that it's not enough to just like identify the problem and like spitball a few solutions. It's like no, you got to create a system to generate the best possible solution. I do find that actually very appealing. I'm not making fun. So I have a hypothesis, and that is I am in the process of generating pitches. This is something I've been talking about a lot lately. So as I progress through the summer, I want to exit the summer with 3 to 5 pitches developed and ready to shop around to different publishers. And I've got a couple done. So I'm moving on to my next one. And the next one, as I was thinking about the look and feel of it, I thought, you know what? I think I'm ready. I think it'd be interesting to try doing a comic entirely in watercolor, like watercolor on paper. Because my first thought was like, oh, watercolor would work really well for the visual tone that I would like to go for with this, and I've been practicing it a lot. But where was I going with that? Oh, my next thought was like, oh, well, Clip Studio Paint has some fabulous watercolor tools. And I was like, no. Come on. Because like you've been practicing on paper. You're getting good at it on paper. It would be a whole new learning curve to take on trying to do it digitally just to protect yourself from messing up on the paper. I recently went to the Billy Ireland where my wife works now. We did when we had some friends in town after A2CAF, we went on a tour of the Billy Ireland again. And there's a Calvin and Hobbes watercolor by Bill Watterson in their collection that they show on the tour, and it's one of the covers from one of his collections, and the lines are actually printed on a piece of acetate that just overlays on top of the watercolor. So what he did is he did the ink drawing first, then light boxed it to watercolor it. And like as we were looking at it, one of the artists that were in the group was like, "Oh, that's so reassuring that even a master of his caliber was worried about messing up the watercolor after inking it, right?"
Mm-hmm.
Because like that's the risk I think about. It's like, well, doing an entirely watercolor comic means that I'm going to ink that page, and that's going to take me at least a couple hours, and then I'm going to start throwing paint down on it, and if I mess up, and there's only so much you can fix, right? Makes me nervous. So that's why I immediately thought like, oh, I could just learn to do it in Clip Studio Paint. Then I've got like a little bit of like, I've got undos, I've got versioning that I can go back to, right? And I thought, no. Just at least for the pitch, you're only gonna do 5 to 10 pages for the pitch. Just see if you can do it. So this will solve 2 problems. One is it'll give me an interesting looking pitch. 2 is it's testing the hypothesis. Am I ready to commit to say a 150 page book that I do entirely in watercolor? And upon making that, framework for myself, I thought, oh, it's been a long time since I've drawn on paper for finished work, right? I sketch in my sketchbook plenty of times. I do lots of sketching in my sketchbook, but I don't sit down with like Bristol or with watercolor paper and go like, okay, I'm about to do a drawing that I would like publish. So it just so happens that I got invited to contribute a pinup to the John Aman Kickstarter that Barry Gregory is doing, a collection of the first five or six issues of John Aman, Amazing Man, this public domain superhero character that he's been making new comics about.
How big is that page?
Well, this is only like 9 by 14, like it's legal size. Wow. It's a little smaller than I used to work. I used to work 10 by 15, which is, almost a tabloid size. But to do this, I was like, okay, I'm going to pencil it digitally, but because it's like an old pulp hero, I think it'd be best if I actually inked it on the boards as in the old days, the old way we used to do it. But I hadn't used my old crow quill. This is a Hunts 102 crow quill. See if we can get it into focus right there. This is what I like for the in the early aughts.
The pen, but yeah, if it has writing on it, we're not getting that. But
oh no, that's just the barcode.
Oh.
And you can see how much you can scan it. And you can find out how much it costs. Actually, it's $1.99 for the holder. Nice. But anyway, yeah, this is the pen that I used as my primary inking tool. I want to say from like 2002 through 2009. Wow, it really wasn't that long. it felt like it was with me a much longer time. But yeah, like this is what I inked everything with back then. And then of course, a bottle of Speedball Super Black. Where's the label on this thing? Hadn't done it in a long time, so it was reassuring to find out that I could still, I was still in decent shape. It was came together okay. So
it looks awesome.
It looks okay, but it's like it's realizing that I'm about to embark on a series of tests, rather a commitment to testing a hypothesis. I got to do some initial tests to see if my hypothesis is even like decent. And so for one, that's like breaking out old tools and try to draw that way and try to find something. I was lucky in that I had this particular job to do where I could test how well I can use those old tools again for something that is meant to be published. So I had that pressure on me. This wasn't me just being playful and experimenting in solitude and to create something that nobody was necessarily going to see. This was to make something that's actually going to be published in a book. So like I got to test myself under a high pressure scenario. Does that make sense? Like what do they call it?
Like a commitment which comes with something to deliver at a particular time in a particular way. I mean, that's
right. And finding out how long that takes, right? Because again, if I was doing it playfully and as an experiment, I might do it like a couple minutes here, a couple hours, or 20 minutes there. This was something where it's like, nope, you're going to sit down, and this is going to be your focused activity for the next 2 hours. That's all you're going to do, and it took longer than I thought it would. So there's some data to put into my my guess for what this watercolor comic is going to cost me is that it's going to be probably twice as long to make pages as it would had I been drawing them digitally. So the next step is that I'm going to test out a bunch of different kinds of paints. So I have, a palette that I have been using for a while now with some relatively inexpensive paints that keep drying up and falling out of their slots. But then, Anne and I over the last couple of years have been collecting a variety of different kinds of paints. So now I'm going to sit down with, this is the other tool I got next, is got some watercolor paper. I got some cold press and hot press.
What?
Yeah.
What does that mean? Cold press and hot press.
Cool. This is one of those things that I learned as I started to explore watercolor. And Shadowing Tronics is in the chat talking about Becca Hilburn's channel. Yes, Becca Hilburn's YouTube channel, which I believe is Natto Soup. She does watercoloring comics all the time, so she has a lot of tips on this, and she would probably be able to explain this even better than I could. Which is cold press and hot press. It determines the texture of the paper. So hot press is very smooth paper. Cold press has a texture to it. I don't know if you're able to see it in this light, but probably not. It's got just like a light texture to it, which it absorbs the paint differently, and it creates different effects. So I've got to play with a little bit of hot press, a little bit of cold press to do some test drawings to see which I like better. And then I have to test running that watercolor paper through my printer to put the blue lines on, and then try to paint over the blue lines. And if that doesn't work, like if the blue lines merge with the paint too much, or if it's too, like if the blue is too visible, then I'm going to have to pencil with graphite on the paper, lightly erase and ink and lightly erase and paint. So there's still a few more variables that I have to play with in order to test drive this idea. And I'm hoping to do this in the next 3 weeks. So my spare time is going to be consumed with that. That has less to do with a tip or any kind of takeaway where hey, if this ever happens to you kids, this is what we do, but more to describe my thinking process on how I'm planning on tackling this particular little challenge that's cropped up or presented itself to me.
I mean, there's a whole series of interesting things there as far as changing your estimation. So getting real fresh data to make sure you're probably providing a more accurate, you said, well, how much this project would cost you, which would mean, I assume would relate to, what you're hoping as far as an outcome. It's, I mean, you're changing how you, your supply of work and what it costs and all that. That's interesting. But then there's also there's it's a whole, I don't know, a collection of problems going analog where digital, it's almost, I love it And it also has, it like hides so much complexity because you just like different stages of development are layers. So what? Turn the layer off. And
Yeah. Yeah.
but now you mentioned like are you going to try blue pencil and red pencil or
So my I have two potential ways of doing the pencils. One is digitally penciling, printing it off in non-photo blue, and then inking and painting over top of that. My concern is that the inkjet ink is not waterproof, and if it's too, so I don't know if how that's going to affect when the paint starts getting thrown down on top of it. Is that blue going to bleed into the paint colors? So, like, let's say if I want somebody bright yellow, oh, now it's got like this haze of green around the outside of it. Well, then print the blue very, very light. Well, now, and this is what I ran into with inking this John Aman piece, is that I'm not as young as I used to be, Rob, and my vision is not what it used to be. And this is actually kind of like, it's a little bit frightening. It actually made me pause a little bit. It's like I have those what do they call that? Progressive lenses now.
oh, progressive. Okay.
Because I'm doing this, the trombone arm thing when I'm looking at things now. And when I used to ink on paper with a crow quill, I mean, I would get like, inches away from the paper when I was doing some of these tight ink lines. I used to be able to do that. And when I was inking this one, I was like, I can't see that close anymore. So I'm holding it more at arm's length while I'm drawing, which on the one hand is a plus because it means that I'm, seeing the entire composition while I'm drawing instead of getting too focused in on just one little area. But on the other hand, it means that if I print the non-photo blue lines very lightly so that they're not as apparent when you finish the inks, it's kind of hard to see the detail. I can't see my pencils as well as I used to. So one thing that digital has really been assistant with is I can zoom in as big as I want, which, when your close-up vision isn't what it once was, that's pretty great. So that's another thing. So now I'm thinking about, okay, so I'll print the non-photo blue lines really light on the watercolor paper so it doesn't affect the color as much. Well, now am I going to have a problem where I don't see what I actually penciled? Okay, well, then maybe you should switch to just doing regular graphite pencils, like, old-fashioned, Ticonderogas. And then just lightly erase when you're done. But then that's a problem too, because if you have a lot of texture on your paper and if you erase it too hard, you can affect the texture of the paper, which means the paint gets taken down differently. So I've introduced like a lot of complexity to this goal of making a comic that's entirely watercolored. I mean, I think it'll look nice. Like, so the testing I've been doing leading up to this, like when I'm drawing in my sketchbook pieces like this one, with Pickles and Taft and Baron von Bear going into battle together, I think that looks pretty okay. I did this piece a while back and I was sketching and I was like, yeah, I kind of like the way that looks. It'd be fun to do a comic that looks like that. Right.
So, yeah. The behavior of watercolor is really a neat, like a world unto itself.
Yeah. And it's, I remember having this conversation with Ben Hackey at A2CAF a couple years ago when he had an art exhibition from his children's book, Nobody Likes a Goblin. And it was all an entirely watercolored book. And I'm looking at the pieces with him and I asked him, like, well, what was that like going into each page? And he said that he learned to embrace the fact that the watercolor is going to do what it wants to do sometimes. And learning to let go of it that way is like both terrifying and wonderful at the same time. And I thought about that, it's like, it's somebody who you get so used to working when you're working digitally is like, it just nothing's going to get away from you. You can, you can noodle forever if you want to. Right. Whereas like with watercoloring, and this is what I've discovered in playing with it, is that sometimes it's going to do what it wants and I just got to live with it. And having to live with it is immensely freeing in a way, right? Because it means that I can finally walk away from it. I'm like, well, it did what it wanted to. I tried to guide it as best I could, but my mastery is not there yet. Whereas with digital, there's the sense that, you still have a sense of control and maybe even feel like a sense of mastery because you have that sense of control. But I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, digital lets you. Well, I mean, I think it lets you do a little more systematizing. And it's like the options, the variables, the settings, there's less ambiguity. and there's less ambiguity and more specific control because of layers and the and what's what do they call the the way you can color merge with layers and all that. What is that called? Like layer
Oh,
filters and
layer modes.
layer.
Yeah.
Okay. You
Yeah.
can,
Blending modes.
there you go. Thank you. Blending modes. Y- Combining the flexibility of the tools, what they simulate, the like blending modes and layers themselves. It's like, phew, wow, you've got tons of ways to find your own um, maybe limitless or limit. Like, where do you want to set the limit as far as how much control you want to
Well, that's
exude
just
on this?
it. Going back to your story about like trying to find the optimum deal for printing on canvas and going to these places like FedEx, where it's like, okay, well, here's the sizes we have. We create those limitations so that there's less ambiguity for you. You just make sure your art is this size and then we can print it for you.
Mhm.
Versus say the guy who's like, just what's the maximum width? Tell me the maximum width and we can print off whatever length you want, right? Is like, I ran into this and I chronicled this a little bit on my microcast that I run on my Patreon, patreon.com/Jerzy, for the cover for Boulder and Fleet Mining for Trouble, where I got lost trying to this digital painted cover done because I had so many tricks I could try to keep messing with it, and having that many options and playing back and forth for months, like really playing with this thing for months and like my off hours, to where I got to the point where I was like, I couldn't even look at it anymore. Not because I hated it, but because I just didn't even know what it was anymore. Does that make sense? Like it seemed, the ambiguity increased to the point where I couldn't give you what I would call an accurate assessment as to the image's quality. So I had to like send it to some friends going like, hey, if you could change one thing about this, what would it be?
Hmm.
You know, just give me that. Let's narrow it down to one thing to fix, and then I can let it go and let it be. Whereas if I had been doing that painting, well, maybe I say this as shouldn't, because like suppose if I was doing like an oil painting, I would have that ability to noodle with it forever and ever. But my experience with watercoloring has been to the point where, like, because it gets away from me sometimes, I kind of let things go every once in a little bit more, right? Like, well, that wasn't how I expected it to go, but it's fine. It works. Let's keep going. So,
Yeah. That's I don't know. There are different constraints in those approaches. So yeah, I love that. I do love analog, but the convenience of digital I mean, it's a powerful thing. So that's okay. So that's neat. A couple things that make me curious. That some, like, I know it's silly, but like tools I wish I had sometimes. I would love to have a pen plotter. So a pen plotter is, imagine like a 3D printer. Yeah, essentially you have something on an arm, and you've seen these things, right? So you just like a plotter with, and then just put a really hard pencil in there, and then draw as big as you need, right? And then do the painting on that. And I don't know, that'd be pretty great. And I don't know, because like you're combining the natural media and reducing some of the risk and all that.
yeah, that'd be pretty great. No, working on bigger canvases is something that Ann and I have been talking a lot about lately as we're starting our house shopping in Columbus. Is like,
uh,
we want to find a space where, wouldn't it be awesome to have, like, say, like a table the size of like a pool table, but just to do screen printing on, to do like big prints or to do big drawings on. That
yeah.
would be that'd be pretty fun. Um, and also a little bit daunting and terrifying, but that's why we do this, right? It's like we're purposefully.
Sure. Longing for the large canvas, but then seeing the void staring back at you, laughing. Fill this. Um, let's see.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and so mural artists will do something I've admired, where they'll throw up, just project at a wall,
Hmm.
and that's kind of neat. I did a little cheat. I didn't put this in the show notes, but I did. I had you ever go to those places or see where there's like art stores, art activity places for kids, that they'll have sort of pre-drawn canvases.
Oh, I have not seen this.
Ah, well, it'll be. I mean, it looks like essentially a small, pre-framed or pre-stretched canvas, right? That of, a few different sizes and ratios and stuff with different drawings on them, but they're almost like coloring book level detail art. But could be little cartoon character, cats, dogs, flowers, cars, whatever, right? But sort of coloring book level detail overall. And not like the hyper detailed spend hours on this coloring book type coloring books that are cool now.
What they call the adult coloring books. Yeah.
Yeah. But okay. So we've done this before. And as an activity at home, I have just sort of improvised some art before, and then we'll paint on it. And but it's the same kind of thing where you get the cheap canvases, whatever. My youngest had a birthday party. She wanted to do that as an activity and requested for me to make, I think, I forget, 6 or 10 of these things. And I was like, yes, of course, let's do that. And then I to manage that process, I did a drawing. It was it's a silly doodle of I think it's a cat with a scarf and racing goggles in a little cartoon car, right? And I needed to make a bunch of those, so I rigged up something to hold, and what we had an old projector around. It's like this thing literally projects at 800 by 600 resolution, but it's good enough, right? So I hooked it up through the right dongles, got it, projecting of whatever. So then I pointed it down at to be the right size in the canvases, and then I would just draw on that canvas, next canvas, draw on that, essentially retrace my art, and cranked them out.
Neat.
Yeah.
Neat. Yeah. See, I mean, I remember there were art projectors that were being marketed back even when I was a kid that were for that purpose, right? It's like do your doodle on a Post-it note and then project it on your canvas so you can do your painting kind of thing. But that's cool. It didn't occur to me I could even get one of those little Pico projectors for that purpose too, right? It's you don't need super high def, right?
I know. Pico projectors are this thing. It's I long for a Pico projector for some reason. I've window shopped Pico projectors for years, and I've held back.
Just in case, we should probably describe what a Pico projector is if anybody hasn't seen them in their Instagram ads.
Okay. What's funny is that I'm not targeted yet on Instagram. I don't know how. I haven't left the digital cookie trail to be permanently haunted by Pico projectors. But anyway, the Pico projector is roughly the size of your hand, roughly an average adult hand, that is maybe as thick as a deck of cards, maybe a couple decks of cards, and it's a digital projector, and you can project at a wall or piece of paper or whatever. It's neat. It's one of those things where I don't know why, but just the idea of being able to project at a wall and collaborate.
Right. I was just thinking this is very much your thing. Is I might want to do a presentation or collaborate with people at any given time, right? I'm at a bus stop, and somebody's like, "Hey, you want to collaborate on a software project?" You bet. Let's start. And we'll talk about this in the second ad break. But this is we could start our journey mapping together right here with my laptop and this projector on the bus stop, overhang thing.
Yeah. So we do have a few more things that we could cover, but so maybe we'll see what comes up naturally as we explore more of the question of when it makes sense to tackle these things on your own. And
that sounds good to me. Yeah, so let's take a break and then we'll come back and talk about some of the thinking behind the way we do this decision-making process when we encounter these little tiny creative challenges. Before we do that, there'll be about a minute and 30 seconds till we get there. And in the meantime, we got to thank some people who make this show possible. And those people happen to be the folks who support us on Patreon. Patreon.com/LiaNatuart is the website. What is it? It's a way for you to give us a monthly upvote. If you believe in us and what we do, you can support us for as little as $1 a month. And you can cancel at any time. And I want to thank 5 people who have been doing exactly that. First up, Carrie Goebel-Billick, Mushin Girl. Thank you so much for supporting us at LIA Natuart, or patreon.com/LiaNatuart. You can find Carrie at Mushin Girl on all the platforms. And Jesse Kaufman, longtime friend of the show, has been on the show before. Thank you, Jesse, for believing in us and what we do. You can find Jesse on Twitter at Jesse Kaufman. Sophie Lawson, you can find Sophie on Twitter at Sophie Lawson Art. Thank you, Sophie. Also, Nate Marcel. Thank you, Nate, for believing in us and what we do. You can find Nate on Twitter at Great Sea Monster. And finally, thank you to the mysterious K for believing in us for as long as you have. We don't know who you are, but we appreciate your support. And you can join them at patreon.com/leaninttoart, where you will find all the shows we make, as well as the extra leans, the shows we record in between episodes. And they're posted only for people who support us on Patreon. Those posts become an open mic thread where you can take the conversation wherever you want in a safe place where only fellow leaners hang out. Once again, patreon.com/leaninttoart. Thank you, everybody, for supporting us there. It means a lot to us.
It does. It's awesome. And we just really appreciate it. Thank you. Oh, wow. All right. So, this is kind of funny. This problem solving odds and ends format.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of fun. I think I'm just thinking out loud that this is a fun format. I think for us, and also this is a nice thing where we could easily share a bunch of leaners stuff here too. If folks who write in.
That's true. That's true. Let's open up that call and say like, hey, there's a contact button or a keep in touch button on the leaninttoart.com website where you can reach out to us and write us a message, and you give us permission to share it on the show, and we could put together a series of odds and ends episodes with these kinds of little journeys. That'd be great.
Super cool. Yeah. So where were you going when we were heading into this this next section?
Well, I liked what you put together sort of like a little rubric for, how to testing out when we encounter these problems, whether it's, let's get some things printed. Okay, well, how do I investigate this? I think I want to do a watercolor comic. Well, how do I investigate this? How do we decide, and how do we come up with this systematic way of doing the problem solving? You put together like a little series of questions to ask yourself, and I thought they were great.
Okay. Well, all right, cool. I'd like to try to get some kind of triangulation, different perspectives on why am I going about this? Because honestly, there's situations like a Pico projector. It's like a tool I've wanted forever, and I just haven't come up with enough reason for it. And because I ask myself stuff like, well, what is this a medium that I'm trying to create in? Do I like this? Is there something I can learn through this? And do I want to learn this? Why am I curious about this? And is there some sort of learning curve that I may have to practice in order to know more? That, let's say, I want to get a Pico projector because I totally want to do some side gigs, doing murals on walls. Oh my God, that's a lot of variables. I need to learn way more before I would know that would be good enough. How long does it take to learn enough to get good enough at that?
Yeah. And it's impossible. Well, I shouldn't say impossible. It is exceedingly difficult to guess at that, or it's exceedingly risky to guess at that. Well, how hard can it be? Right. Then we get into
nothing's easier than someone else's discipline.
Yeah. That is another t-shirt. That is another t-shirt. Nothing's easier than someone else's discipline. It's like the definition of mythology is other people's religions. It's the definition of easy is what somebody else does.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's I guess there's a story that I had in the first section that we could rope into this idea of determining learning curve is I have been on a multi-year quest to detangle myself from the Adobe ecosystem. Not of any, I don't have hostility towards Adobe, but the idea of paying a monthly fee for a suite of software that in some cases I only use occasionally. I find is a little difficult. It's too big of an ask for me. So it's like, okay, well, now that we're in this like subscription service era, are there any kinds of software I can find that do the job, but I can own it outright, or maybe even better if it's like open source freeware, something that like, but there's like a community that I can donate to instead to help develop this thing and to keep it open to all. And the latest one I was trying to decouple myself from was Adobe InDesign. So I use InDesign a lot for the pagination of different comics projects I do for the Seriously Coalition in Chelsea, Michigan. And it's now that I'm on a Windows machine, and I have an old license to like Photoshop 6 from like the what, mid to late 90s.
Wow.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think
And
that's the one I started. I started with Photoshop 6 in the 90s. Yeah.
let me double check. Yeah, it's Photoshop 6.0 is what I've got on my machine. Yeah, back from when I worked at a newspaper when I was like in my mid 20s. Anyway, so I what?
Nothing. Yeah,
What
it
did
just funny. There's yes. I don't know. Whatever. I'm trying to not hang the obvious lampshades on. Like when you've been around for a while, you've got old tools and the old tools laying around, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm in that boat all over the place, and you encounter these things that like, hey, turns out computers existed back then. And
what's funny is like Photoshop 6, it has layer support, it has undo support, because remember like Photoshop 3, I think you only had one undo. Like the history palette was introduced later, right?
Sure.
And
undo was an innovation.
Yeah. And multiple undos was like a big innovation. But Photoshop 6 doesn't have batch processing. So I can't do like an automated task and like batch process a bunch of images.
I think that didn't come around till Photoshop 9.
So anyway, so it's serviceable for like certain things, like removing blue lines from my art, right? Because I could just go into channels, isolate the blue channel, get rid of it, and export it as a grayscale image. So that's the only reason I keep it around, is for that purpose. But I don't have InDesign on my Windows machine. I have it on a crusty old Mac that barely works anymore. And like I was using it and I was like, it's taking far too long to do the work that I need to do. There must be some other options. And I looked into some other options and I found two different apps. One was Scribus, which is it. Have you heard of this?
Yeah, isn't Scribus isn't that a open source app?
It is an open source app. So
Yeah.
I was playing with that one first and I was like, okay, but it looks like it's going to take me a little while to get where I need to be with it. I downloaded it and I have every intention of using it, but I knew that the learning curve was going to be a little bit steep. Not steep. It was good to have some cost associated with it. And I really needed to get some work done on an InDesign, rather a design document. And so then I also discovered Affinity Designer. Have you heard about, or Affinity Publisher, I should say. Have you heard about this one?
No, I've heard of an Affinity Designer, but not Publisher.
So Affinity is trying to do their own version of the Adobe apps, but go back to they're competing by being the previous model. So it's like, here's your desktop, here's your image editing, here's your photo editing, here's your design and vector editing, here's your InDesign type of app, and it all is interoperating. It's like a suite of apps, but it's like $40 an app. Right. So
that's not bad. Interesting.
That's so
it supports the format. I have so many projects in the .ai file format.
Yeah. I don't think it supports InDesign documents. I think that format is proprietary enough that they couldn't do it.
Oh no. Okay. I was looking at Affinity Designer because again, I'm in similar boat where it's just like that recurring monthly fee. It's tough. It was kind of like where you could sort of go a version or two and say, well, you know what? I'm not going to worry about upgrading this year my whole suite of Adobe tools, right? But I could go, I'll budget for it next year or what have you. But now it's just a constant, n number of bucks per month. So this is tempting.
So it was tempting enough for me where I need to get the work done fast. And I looked at they had, Affinity Publisher had a beta demo you could download as they were finishing developing the application. And I downloaded it and looked at it. I was like, oh, this corresponds very closely to the InDesign interface, which I know very well because I've been using it for years. So it's like, it's so much less painful for me to drop the $40 on this app and just get it now, get the work done now, rather than spend who knows how much time learning a new interface with this open source one. I still want to learn the open source one because I would like to get to that point eventually, right? I'd like to go full vegan, as it were. Right now I'm still eating cheese.
Okay.
Does that correspond? Anyway, but like, that was just to like support this notion of what you're talking about, like is finding out what the learning curve is to this thing. Like, so going back to the Pico projector idea, it's like, well, you know what made it a lot more compelling of an idea to me is because like I was thinking about how I would just like to have it in my bag when I go to teach workshops, because I never know what the technology setup is going to be at every event. Like I can get a sense of it, and most of the time my hosting orgs are very open and clear with me. But every once in a while, I work with a school where they're like, I get there and they're like, "Oh, you wanted a projector?" I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, we'll just work with a flip chart." And I'm flexible that way. But it'd be cool to be able to be like, "Hey, totally got the MacGyver bag here. Boop, boop, boop. Set this up, and now we're running with I'm to do digital drawing for everybody." But that's like one use case. But if I can also say, and I can hook it up to like a rig and we could project onto a big canvas and we could do some really big drawings together, now I just got like, now it's a multitasker. And now I can justify that $60 to $80 that I'd be spending on it, right?
Yes. Justifying. So that's that's the thing. Like I can propose to myself all sorts of tools, all day, every day, because of the fun and excitement, whatever. So that's where I try to ask enough questions where it sort of pokes holes in my own arguments. It's like, so I can't just keep saying, but Pico projectors, come on. You know how awesome that is?
There's something really cool. There's something like this just very moving about like technology that was once this big being this big, right?
Yeah. Projectors. Yeah. Used to be huge.
Going back to like the old man talk, because I remember when the first iPod came out, and like its big selling point was like 1,000 songs inside of a device the size of a deck of cards, and like that was all they needed to say to me. I was like, what? and I told Ann, she's like, I don't know if we have 1,000 songs. I was like, we don't have an extensive CD collection. I'm like, but it's the size of a deck of cards. You can put it in your pocket.
Yep.
I'm a light touch when it comes to that.
I know I am too. So it's like I've picked Pico projectors where I've drawn the line, where I'm like, until I can fully justify that thing. So yeah, okay. So what is there any situation? So how Affinity Designer and plus Scribus, that seems pretty cool. I did a little bit of searching too, as far as other people are on the hunt for the same kind of need. Absolutely. Like going from, going essentially from the world of InDesign, it's just a more complex situation.
The final one for me that I want to solve is finding something that can do what Adobe Bridge does. Because like one thing that I really love about Bridge, I don't use it a lot, but the one thing I used it, the one reason I opened it a lot was, that's a weird sentence. I didn't use all of its functionality, but one thing I used whenever I used it, there we go, is how you could just like select a whole bunch of images and just say, give me a PDF of that. Right. That business is nice. I think actually Windows has that built into it, but for some reason it always puts my images out of order. So if I like say like I've got like 35 JPEGs from a comic I'm working on, and I just want to make a quick PDF of it, it'll do it. I can just group them and say like make a PDF, and it says sure. It's like, here's all your pages. Like, but why are they out of order? I don't know. I'm Windows. So and I tried to
one pile of PDF coming up right up. But I wanted it.
Hey, I'm Windows. Here you go. Here's your PDFs. But I try to figure out why it does it that way, and like, can I, maybe if I do a different like window view so that I can look at it in list mode with like, latest added versus, alphabetical by title. It never puts them in the proper order. It always does it in some like obscure ranking system that I can't figure out. So, but yeah, if I can figure out like solve that problem, then I don't need to touch Adobe products again, except for removing blue lines. So there's two. Then there's like removing blue lines from my artwork in some other app besides Photoshop. But like I said, I have that old version of Photoshop that works fine on my Windows machine. So there's no reason for me to disentangle from that.
There's probably an option. Like, so in the world of command line tools and scripting and stuff, there's definitely like Python libraries that can help as far as reordering stuff with PDFs. A Mac itself, when you have the preview app, lets you move stuff and save a PDF, reordering it. And the built-in, again, in the Mac world, Automator is really powerful as far as being able to do stuff with PDF, like that whole throw a bunch of files at something to generate a PDF. Yeah, Mac can do that easily with Automator. Yeah, but and also there are scripts in Python. I've been looking. I always have a list of like a playground of I want to automate this thing next, and I treat it less aggressive. Like Pico projectors, I was going to have to like prove something big to me before it shows up, just because I'm just too vulnerable to Pico projectors. So this
I just like the idea of us being like, this is our Sears catalog. Like when we were kids, you look at the Sears catalog around Christmas time, like, oh, I'll have 2 of those and 3 of those. Like now it's like, it's an Amazon ad for a Pico projector showing up on our Facebook feed. And we're laying on our stomachs going like, oh
no.
What do you want that for? I don't know. I just want it.
Yep.
Shadowwingtronics is typing in the chat about the exporting PDFs out of Windows. The trick is the order you select them. He says, I usually have to do a few tries before I get it done. That's good to know. I'll try it that way. I'll try doing it that way and see if that makes a difference for me. I'm betting that's it. It's probably something as simple as that. Hi, I'm Windows. Okay. But so I know I like Windows actually. Windows 10 is like pretty great. But it's nice. I mean, I haven't had any regrets about switching over. Well, a couple, but anyway. Interesting questions to explore. Let's go back to your questions and see if we can dig just a couple of them a little bit deeper. Do I like this medium? Is this something I would like to learn? Why am I curious about this? So when I think about like the watercolor comic, I did ask myself some hard questions as to like, it started with an intuition that, you know what, for the tone of this particular story, I think watercolor would be the right medium for it. And then the next question is, of course, why? Well, why would you say that? Because like, why not just do it with, why not do it with zip tones? Why not do it digitally? Why not do it with a variety of tools? Why this tool and not that tool? Is it just because you took a watercolor class and been practicing watercolor and you're very excited about it? Is it as simple as that? If so, you better try to sell me on this a little bit harder, right? Don't Pico projector me with this watercoloring thing. come up with some more reasons, right? And so I thought about it. I was like, well, I'm trying to go for something that feels kind of old timey and spooky. And I really want this to feel like some of my childhood nightmares. I'm trying to do like a straight up like not horror, but a mysterious kind of spooky book, or rather a pitch for one. And I think that the slick look that I achieve on things like Amazon Academy is inappropriate for this. If I feel like it needs to be a little bit more analog looking, and if we wanted to get really analog looking, let's go all the way analog. Right. I think that will contribute to the visual tone as I imagine the scenes that I want to put together for this book. Also, I would like it to look a little bit like how French comics looks. Like I know I'm not going to get all the way to Johann Safar, but I'd like to like step in that direction. I want to take 2 steps to the right towards I'm going to pronounce it wrong. Bande dessinée, right? French comics. So, I don't know if you ever read Trondheim's Dungeon but like it's a fabulous comic, and it's so visually dense and full of humor, yet it feels dank and drippy, because I mean it takes place in a dungeon, but it's like talking animals in a dungeon, and it's like sort of sword and sorcery, medieval knight animals and pirates in a dungeon. Wonderful
Sounds
book,
pretty
but
cool.
like
I have to check it out.
so but yeah, it's like I thought about like, okay, well, these are the things that are influencing what look I want, and they are done ink on paper. Let's do that. um so yeah, so like I answered the question, like, why am I curious about this? Why do I want to solve this problem this particular way? And do I even like doing this? Well, yes, I've done lots of testing over the last couple of years, practicing watercoloring, and finding that as I leveled up at it, it wound up becoming a very pleasurable way to draw. So yeah, I guess just trying to demonstrate that idea of like building the system by asking yourself some questions as to what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it that way.
Yeah,
And
exactly. And whatever the
yeah,
questions, they don't have to be these questions. Essentially, try to interview yourself to really get to the bottom of it. And that's using self interviews, and I find it pretty handy. Like I've been gathering a bunch of questions that I've used for different projects and stuff, and maybe I'll turn it into a book or something. But like it's the just digging in, and it's in whatever um like whatever your thought process is, able to getting some sight on it and saying like, I see this is what I'm trying to go for, and this is what I'm getting at. I do really love the the experience of the watercolors, and I want that to come through into my next project. I want my next project to not just be designed about its profitability, but I want it to be fun. That's and that can be enough. And it's in like whatever is enough. It isn't like, again, like whatever questions help you dig in and get some insight on your own approach. That's great. And so for
mhm,
me, like as far as why even do that, because you don't have to, right? I mean, it's just to me, it's just it puts it in the realm of like design is problem solving, having some kind of intent and seeing where you can get with it. I tend to, at some point, if I'm not doing this, just spin my wheels and, where's the finish line and all that kind of stuff. So this sets me up to likely not get stuck like that.
yeah, same here. Another question I would add to that list is, are you adding any additional costs with regard to like materials or time in doing it this way? And is that cost paid for by the result? Right? Because like one of the things that I think about is like I really, really deeply dislike scanning artwork. I mean, I find it so tedious, and I'm so frustrated by how long it takes. And it takes just long enough that I have to sit and wait for it to happen, but it's just short enough that I can't go do something else while it's happening, right? Like there's no way to automate it, right? So it's this unpleasant, dreary thing that I have to attend to, and I just stare with just deep resentment at my scanner while it's
Sorry
doing
for
it.
laughing.
No, I
That is a trap now. Now I don't like scanning. I didn't think of it like this.
like I was talking about this with Ben Hackey when he was in town for A2CAF, and he's like, "Oh, I really enjoy it." I'm like, "Why? Why would you enjoy such a terrible thing?" It's like, "Oh, it's very meditative, and you can do other things." Like, no, you can't. Like, I can't even go and get a cup of coffee. By the time I get the cup of coffee, it's done scanning, and now I forgot which one part I scanned. I forget which half of the page. So, like, another thing I'm thinking about, what if I do this, and if let's say the book gets picked up, and like now I got to do this whole book, uh, would it like what's the cost benefit analysis of getting a really nice high end large format scanner, right? Which is going to be, I think they still run around $1,000. So that's like, it's not an insignificant amount of money. But like then I got to figure out like, okay, how much time am I going to save by being able to do like one pass instead of two, and then having to put it together with, again, going back to Adobe products again with what is that called, the photo merge filter, which is great. It's a very it's a wonderful innovation in the software that we didn't have 10 years ago. Take these two halves of the scan that I did and make it into one image. But but I wonder if Clip has that. I bet Clip does have that. Anyway, um, yeah, it's like that's like another cost I'm introducing by exploring this. So yes, more fun to do. I like the results, but now I'm looking into like this dark tunnel of scanning. Can I get an intern to come over here and scan the work for me? Your time is less valuable than mine. You stare at this thing.
That's, I mean, that's part of the, yeah, I mean, they can come up with their own, maybe there's a way to improve the task with a fresh set of eyes. But like, no, I don't know. That is interesting. Yep, collaborating, hiring it out, automating it. I mean, these are common business problems, right? What do you do, and what makes sense for, I guess, your interest and budget, and overall recipe for the project. Yeah, scanning. That's funny. I forgot how much you dislike it. So far, yeah, I've not had to scan anything that big. In like when I tried to scan things in the old days. Well, what's funny, like my scanning, I guess, thinking of old technology, have you ever heard of ThunderScan?
No, but I love the name. What is ThunderScan? I'm gonna look it up.
So ThunderScan was an app and a little add-on for the Apple Image Writer 2. And this, so you would, it would look, you remember like print ribbons for the old Apple printers, right? It looked like a big old thing, like a cassette, whatever. You snap that into the printer. In this case, instead of like printing on the paper, you put your artwork into the printer, and then this ThunderScan would, let's go zip, 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 zip across the page, and then it would appear on your Mac, original Mac.
Wow. What was the resolution on that?
I don't remember. Pretty low. I don't think I knew what resolution was at the time.
Right. Yeah, it was totally like a bitmapped image.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Yep. So
ThunderScan.
But no, it was hard too. Where scanning, you ever use one of those handheld scanners too?
I've never used one of those, but I remember seeing them like being advertised in a lot of the different tech magazines in the 90s.
Yeah, so I would scan my large like pencil drawings or whatever with those sometimes, and with great pain and great patience, because that is moving your hand along a thing and then doing it again. You have to do it within a pretty tight pretty low margin for error. Like if you go a little bit to an angle or go like just move your hand just a little bit, that was rough. So I don't know. Scanning, but I was like, well, I guess this art is forgotten from the digital world until it catches up to when I can do this.
Shadowwing is chiming in on scanning, saying scanning is a good time to watch a video or play a little Trip Peaks. But that's just it. It's like maybe I don't know if I should go get tested for some kind of attention issues, because if I do anything else, I'll forget what I just scanned. And like if it'll come time to name it or like put it where it's supposed to go, and I'll be like, which one is it? And I'll pick it up, and then the page will come out, and I'll be like, which side did I scan, or which end? Like, so like when I'm scanning something like this size, I'll do the top half and the bottom half, right? And I'll just lose track with what I'm doing, and I just get so frustrated. So like I have to stare at it, and then like once it's done, like change its name format, because the scanner I've got is like not an awesome scanner, and the software is really kind of junky, and it's like it scans it with like a pre-designated name that I have to change afterwards, and like I could change what the initial name is, but then it's anyway. So like I got top half, bottom half. I have to rename them when I do that. So
that's no fun.
I feel like I'm entering into like old man yells at cloud territory when I start talking about this, but it is a pain point that I think I need to be ready for should I make the leap over to doing this watercolor pitch.
It's worth thinking about. Another thing it's worth considering, I mean, old man automates yelling at cloud. That's my approach.
Well, if I had a large flatbed, I could do it in one scan, and then it could be named what, I could just call it, project name, and then it'll just call them project name 1, project name 2, project name 3, as I'm scanning each one. That would make my life a lot easier. So maybe this is just a situation where I would enjoy it more if I had a large format scanner, so I didn't have to do this piecemeal thing. So,
yeah, always a puzzle. Sounds like a problem.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for your support.
I don't
Oh, that's good. Okay. Are we heading into final thought time?
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
okay.
This is a good collection. Is there a question that you wanted to revisit, or was there? I am fascinated by some of the other things that you wrote down here. We covered 2 of them, but we could do one more.
Okay. Sure. So how about we'll cover one last problem solving thing, an odd end that we ran into. Once again, I do want to emphasize, if you guys have some of these little stories of your own that you want to share with us, it's leanitoart.com. Go to the keep in touch link on the website. And as a matter of fact, I will pull it up right now before we head into the break.
I think if you go to leanintoart.com/contact.
So it's right here, contact.
Mm-hmm.
And then it'll take you to this form, so you can give us your name, your email address, your Twitter handle, and then your message, and then you can grant us permission to read on mic, so you can be part of the next odds and ends episode. So okay, yes, and so we'll take on final thought in just a second, another couple minutes, but we got to thank some more people who make the show possible. Those people happen to be us. We make the show possible. We make stuff, and then we bring the thoughts that occur to us while we make the stuff to the show, as we've been demonstrating this episode. The thing I make that I hope you will check out today is Amazon Academy. It's a webcomic I'm working on with my friend Dan Mishkin. Dan Mishkin, who, DC Comics writer who created the character Blue Devil, Amethyst Princess of Gem World, and wrote Wonder Woman for a long time, wrote some issues of Superman, and now we're working together on this comic about a school for Amazons, for where both American girls and Amazon girls can go to learn the ways of the Amazon, sort of like the ethos. But there's a mystery involved, because one of the taglines of the series is "Every girl has secrets," and we start the story with this Amazon being chased by other Amazons, and she's hiding this baby someplace, and we don't know who the baby is. And then 13 years later, we're in the school and we're seeing all these different girl characters. Which one was the baby that the Amazon was hiding, and what is the secret behind the baby? Well, if you start reading at AmazonAcademy.net, or you can also buy the first issue on IndiePlanet.com. Just do a search for Amazon Academy. And the comic's going to start updating again very soon. I've resumed work on it now that we're past A2 CAF. So, Rob, you made a class.
I did. Yeah. Amazon Academy is super. It's a really cool comic and beautiful. I need to pick up that first one. And is there an easy link to pick that up, by the way?
What, the Amazon Academy comic? No, it's at Indie Planet right now. Just go to indieplanet.com, and then there's a search bar. You can search for my name, and actually I've got a bunch of comics on Indie Planet that you can purchase to this day.
Nice. They're a great service. So okay, yeah, I made a class. It's it sort of encapsulates some. It's under this. It's almost a MacGuffin, right? It's about drawing user journey maps. Drawing user journey maps is a handy thing to unbox your ideas about putting yourself in the shoes of your audience, and what did the experience when? What's it like before they start using your product? Where were they? How do you reach them? And then what happens as things progress? That's powerful and very useful. It's good user-centric concept to work through and to produce that kind of thing for conversation and helping collaboration, doing research where you really know what that journey is. That's neat. That's useful. And drawing that out, it's handy. I mean, it's in a way, it's like a simple, like this as storytellers, like writing out a sequence of events, the storyboard, what have you. Where it gets super useful is as a collaboration mechanism. And that's the real that's the heart of this class that I put together, drawing user journey maps to help you collaborate. And it's available on Skillshare. It's like a 47-minute class, and it goes into a variety of things as far as like like thinking about the tools, like when and how would you want to do this? I end up demonstrating it in an analog way, but you could do it digital and whatnot too. So it covers, basics of tools and when would you want to do this, and how would you get set up to succeed, and what does it look like as far as you helping bring together different perspectives of yourself or your team. If you're working solo, it recommends essentially putting on these different hats as far as thinking from a business problem solving standpoint, thinking from a design problem solving standpoint, including your users, and also thinking about like the builders and engineers. And so you weave that all together and you've got a pretty strong idea of like what you can do next to move a project forward. It's pretty handy, and it encapsulates a lot of stuff that I've that I've worked on quite a bit in the last 6 years and received a lot of great feedback on and have honed. And here you go. If you go to robstenzinger.com, find the link on my homepage, just click on drawing user journey maps. You can sign up for Skillshare or just start taking the class if you're already signed up. If you're not signed up yet for Skillshare, you get like a couple months free. So pretty neat. It's like essentially a Netflix style service where there's sort of either you pay it once a year or pay it once a month, and you have access to all the stuff, all these different classes folks are teaching out there, and there's a lot of great things. Then yeah, anyway, check it out.
That's at robstenzinger.com. There's the image right there on the bottom, right next to the Lean Into Artcast logo. You can't miss it. So, but if you're here because you like the way we think about stuff and not so much the stuff we make, fair enough. The show is the thing we make. Although I would argue that the Skillshare class that Rob just described is very much like this thing that you're listening to right now, just minus me. It's all Rob, and it's 47 minutes long. But there's more things like it at leanitoart.com/workshops, where you can download self-contained classes at a price of your choosing, even free. If you're watching the video on YouTube right now, giving it a thumbs up helps more people find the show. And if you're listening to it in a podcast app like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to the show, if you could go to the directory and give us a 5-star rating, that helps more people find the show as well. And we thank everybody who's been doing those things. It means a lot to us.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay. Final thought. What do you want to do for final thought? What do you have in mind?
Well, let's see. There's I don't know, you had another interesting thing as far as like you're trying to use your is it a Galaxy Note 4?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And like, I guess, how did that come about, and what's this situation, this problem you're looking at?
So yeah, after killing 2 Galaxy Note 2s 3 or 4 years ago, like right in a row. Like I just, like for some reason I was using them normally. I wasn't doing anything weird. I wasn't jailbreaking them or, like rooting any, new OSs onto them or anything. But like they just like, bricked. And I tried, a lot of different ways to resuscitate them. Couldn't get them to come back. Switched to using an iPhone after that and found that I was really, really sad having this piece of glass in my pocket that could do all these things except draw. Like I could do so much. I could record podcasts on it. I could like take wonderful photographs on it. I can network with my friends on it. I can talk on it, but I can't draw on it. And so I got a cheap used Galaxy Note 4, which is what they're working on the 10 right now. So it's an old phone and it's kind of laggy, but it's still great for drawing on. And it's got a Wacom, what is it? Is it the EMS digitizer? It's the one where you don't need a battery for the pen. And it's pretty nice and responsive. And it's, it's a 5.5-inch screen. So it's just big enough that you can use it as a sketchbook. Now, one would say, why don't you use a real sketchbook? Yes, I do. I carry a sketchbook around me with me everywhere. But here is the thing is that there was this app that I got very excited about called Ibis Paint X. I don't know if you heard about this one, Rob.
I've heard of it, but yeah, I don't have a lot of experience with Ibis Paint.
It's a pretty nice looking drawing application that supports multiple layers, blending modes. It has a lot of great tools that you would use in a desktop app. It's a little stripped down because it's for a phone. But the key feature that made my eyes widen was like you can start a drawing in it, export it to Clip Studio Paint format, and upload it to your Clip Studio account. So Clip Studio recently, like last year or two, ran this feature with the application where there's Clip Studio Paint, the drawing application. Then there's Clip Studio, which is sort of like a cloud account that you have with which you can store, in progress documents. Um, I forget how much storage it gives you initially. It's not a whole lot, but it also becomes like sort of like a marketplace to purchase different like material files, like 3D files, texture files, different kinds of pen tips, and so on, brushes. But it's also your cloud account, so that if you have any in progress works, you can save them to a cloud account. So if you work on different terminals or different computers, you can, let's say you don't want to sync everything through like your OneDrive or Dropbox, you can just sync it through your Clip Studio account. And so this phone app, IBIS Paint X, allows you to export to your Clip Studio account. So I could start sketching something on the road.
It's not the same company, and it lets you do that.
It's totally, it's not the same company, but totally lets you do that. And like we were talking off mic about how like on the iPad Clip Studio, it's like really, it can be challenging sometimes to get your files off of the iPad onto some other service, right? Well, this is like, this solves this problem really elegantly, where it's like, okay, well, I could just start the drawing, start a comics page here, upload it to my Clip Studio account or sync it with that. And then I can go to my desktop machine and just continue working on it. And it supports all the layers, and it's, the proper format and everything. I hadn't done any testing with like doing any lettering and like play with, but I was mostly thinking of it as like, well, now my phone, this big phone that I have in my pocket, becomes a way for me to just like do some visual development of stuff for my comics work. And as a matter of fact, some of the stuff that I have drawn for desktop images for the Boulder and Fleet Patreon, once again, patreon.com/Jerzy, started out as a phone sketch. I started as a phone sketch and then exported to Clip Studio Paint and then finished the drawing, and then, and it's done. But the one thing that I was frustrated about with IBIS Paint is it's got a pro model where you have to pay a certain amount so you don't see ads, but you also have to pay a certain amount so that you can use all the brushes. There's like a ton of brushes, but like you can either watch an ad or pay the pro account to unlock the brushes for 24 hours, or rather watch an ad to unlock the brushes for 24 hours, or pay the pro account. Like, I forget what it is, $25 or something like that to like unlock everything, which I feel like that's a fair thing to ask. But then I was trying to like play around with the brushes and mess with them to like get just the right amount of texture to some of the brushes, because I made this brush in Metabang Paint that like mimics what how a graphite pencil looks on paper, just like that irregularity of the line, just like a little bit of a texture to it. Super not that important, but it just contributes to my pleasure of the drawing experience, where it looks like I'm drawing on paper kind of thing. For some reason, I don't need it to feel like I'm drawing on paper as much as it feels better if it looks like I'm drawing on paper, if that makes any sense. And it's just that you can't monkey with the brushes as easily in IBIS Paint. And if you get more than 3 layers, at least on my old Galaxy Note 4, it's just too darn laggy. I can't draw anything that's high enough resolution, or with enough like layers in it to where it starts getting in the way of me having a good time drawing. So I had to, like, I was telling a student, we were having a Instagram chat about this because he was using it too, and he was running into the same problems. And I was like, yeah, I really wanted to like this app. I showed up with like a bouquet of flowers going like, I'm ready. I'm ready to be friends with you for a long time. And it's like, it was too much trouble. And so I'm going back to using Metabang Paint on my phone as which, you can export to OneDrive. So I can just export the file as a PSD file, which I can also open in Metabang Paint, and I just sync it on my OneDrive account, and I can still get it that way. So,
okay,
so that's the journey I went through.
It's no, I'm a fan of being able to draw on the phone. It's like, why not? Why can't we? And it's hard being in the Apple ecosystem for the most part. Not entirely, but quite a bit. There's odd little fences and limitations, and I know, we're in a quirky minority, I suppose, but but certainly there's a market for people who want to draw on their phone. I end up just using little I've done a couple of doodly animations and whatnot that they're very stick figure like, but I haven't done a ton of drawing on my phone because it's sort of, I have to, work around the idea that, I need to carry a stylus that's not as precise as a like the Apple Pencil. Apple Pencil works awesome on the iPad, of course. But
Oh, I've used it and it's great. But like, yeah, and actually, it seems like they could roll that functionality out into their bigger phones, but that pencil is just so darn big. They would have to do a tinier version of the pencil so it doesn't look like you're walking around with like drumstick trying to draw on your phone. But the drawing experience is wonderful, and it's just like, well, let me have it on a little screen too.
Yep.
That would be nice.
No, that's cool. And the Galaxy is not a bad device. I've played with them a little bit. I like those things. So, interesting. And the older models are not that expensive. I mean,
no, they're not. I mean, like you can get a Galaxy Note 3 for like $150 on eBay. But just the software, the TouchWiz, what do they call that? The launcher on it. And the Android software on it is just it's slow. And we've talked about this before too. Is like Android, like I don't know how it is in the newer Android versions, but on the old ones, it's just like everything wants to run. Everything. If you got 6 apps on there, all 6 apps are running all the time. You know, it's like you have to constantly shut them down. Like, stop running. But you need to know the weather now. No, I don't. I'll ask you when I want to know the weather.
All right. So it is funny. It's every ecosystem has their quirks. And honestly, using a stylus on the iPhone that's not Apple Pencil, it's not bad. It's okay. It's just not as nice as that little like that well crafted right sized pen that the notes use. So
yeah, they're really cool. They're really nice. So going back to like Metabang is still great because you can sync your instances of Metabang Paint like from your desktop to your because it also has a cloud syncing thing. Like it does the same thing as Clip Studio, where there's like a Metabang sort of launching page where you can like save assets and brushes, and you could even save your brush and menu setup so that when you launch it on your phone, all those brushes get transferred over. So that was like the winning thing for me, is that I can make custom pencils for this thing that feel very natural and look really great. I think I like that blur on the pencil line because it mimics the imperfection of the line just enough for me. So I feel more like I'm penciling and I'm not worried about making like a perfect drawing. And when the line's too crisp when I'm penciling, it doesn't feel like I'm penciling anymore, if that makes sense. So like I can make the brush on my desktop, sync it to my account, and then when I open up my phone, those brushes will just be there. So that's a pretty winning combo for Metabang Paint.
It's also one thing I'm hearing is that you almost have you have goals that you're trying to reach. You're trying to get finished art and art in progress accomplished, and different tools you can just roll in and roll out of your process. That's I guess it's nice to have the options. I guess I don't that's the thing, like all of our tools, they change a lot, especially in the digital world. It's like the business models change and then off you go into needing to adapt or take on the new thing. And I don't know I don't know how I feel about that. Is it inevitable? Is it I don't know, just it is what it is. I mean, we just need to roll with it unless you make your own app to do the drawing. And even then, as a creator of apps, the platforms change. And so now you're the one needing to keep these things up to date. It's a lot of work. So
yeah, it is. But it comes back to the thing that I tell my students all the time is that, but like the good news is you're never going to be bored. So, I mean, it's like this idea that like sometimes we can get frustrated and be like, can't it just stay the same for 5 years? And like, yeah, maybe that would be kind of cool every once in a while. But on the other hand, it's like rolling and adapting is part of what makes making art interesting. And it's what I think it helps fuel our creativity to constantly be adapting so that we always have something to say. So I don't know. I'm trying to bright side it here, but that's what we do as creative people. And so I consider this as part of the price we pay, but also just part of the price we pay just existing.
Sure. Even if you're not trying to make comics on your phone, it's the platforms and all that stuff and the market, things keep changing. So it just, I think we bump into it maybe slightly more than average with having specific goals and interests to try to keep improving our process or solving new problems and stuff. So I think we bump into it more. Yeah, because sometimes things that are solved get unsolved, and even though you didn't do anything, it's except like upgrade your app or phone or whatever.
And that's one of the stories that you'll save for next time when we do one of these episodes.
Yeah.
Where it's like, I was doing what you told me to. I was keeping my software up to date. I did everything right. Why do bad things happen to good people?
Yes.
All right. Well,
all right.
For now, I think we did a podcast.
I think we did. That was fun. Thank you, Jerzy.
Thank you, Rob. All right. We record the show usually every Thursday. That is TBD. We will figure out what we're going to be doing in the weeks to come. That's another thing you can email us on at leanintort.com/contact. When would you like us to do the show? Now that we're like being playful with this.
One more curveball there. Also, I don't know how easy it's going to be for us to do this live anymore. We'll see. Because speaking of platforms changing, hey, Google Hangouts going away.
Hi, I'm Google. Did you like that thing? Yeah, I did. I really did. Oh, that's fun because we're making it go away.
I kind of need that. I was standing there. No, it's all right. Learn to levitate.
You really didn't. You didn't, because we did a user testing and you didn't need it. Okay, well, we'll have to figure out something. There's supposedly another way to do it through YouTube. We'll figure it out, maybe. Okay. But yeah. But it seems like it's going to be a lot more complex to do. But that's what we do, is we adapt. So, but usually we record at least once a week, and we stream it for now on YouTube, and then collect it as a podcast at leanintort.com and patreon.com/leanintoart. We'll be back soon with another episode. Until then, I've been Jerzy Drozd of leanintort.com and Jerzy Drozd on Instagram.
And I've been Rob Stenzinger, also of leanintort.com, and I'm findable on Instagram also as Rob Stenzinger.
Okay, bye.
Show notes for this episode can be found at leanintoart.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at the user leanintoart, and you can reach us via email at leanintoart@gmail.com. And remember, leaners aren't wieners. Thanks for listening.
Okay, I'm going to shut off the stream. Thanks for hanging out with us, everybody. See you next time.
Thank you. See ya.
We'll give more notice.